Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Microsoft Fabric UK user group. I'm your host, Leon Gordon, and I'm here with my co-host, Pragati Jain. Pragati, how are you today?
I'm good, Leon. How are you?
Yes, fantastic, thank you. Just trying to get to grips with what the UK weather is deciding to do at the moment, whether it's
Oh,
going
yeah.
to be raining and hot and hot, or somewhere in between that. So
Looks like cold to me today. Not sure why.
yeah, it just sounds like a typical UK summer.
UK weather. Yeah.
Exactly. As always, please do let us know where in the world you're joining us from. We do have another fantastic session to bring to you today with another Microsoft MVP, a good friend of ours, Paul Andrew. We're going to be looking at how can Microsoft Fabric have an impact on your business. As I've mentioned, Paul is a Microsoft MVP, and he's also the co-founder and CTO of Cloud Formations, which is a specialist data consultancy based in the UK. Without any further ado, let me just bring Paul onto screen. Paul, good to see you.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, I guess, for everybody out there. Thanks, Leon Pragati, for having me.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for joining us. I know that we've mentioned already, Fabric is a hot topic at the moment. So really keen to dive in and really see how businesses how Fabric can have an impact on people's businesses. So we won't keep you, Paul. We'll dive straight into the session if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Let's get into it.
Thank you.
So before we get into the good stuff, I also organise the Data Relay conference. So bit of a plug here. Data Relay will be touring the UK in October, 5 different locations. We're actually starting out at the International Museum of Computing. We all know it as Bletchley Park, but they don't like to call it Bletchley Park. So we're starting out there, going round to Reading, Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester. It's free to attend, so get signed up in person, and hopefully we'll see you there. Good. Plug over with. So yes, my name is Paul Andrew. I'm very old and tired. You can maybe tell by the grey hair on my head now, but sort of 15 years experience, I think, in this industry, designing, delivering, and building training on all things Microsoft and data. So hopefully, as this technology evolves and what we're going to look at with Fabric today, hopefully this kind of mirrors some of the experience that I've had in my career using some of this tech. And hopefully I can share with you that knowledge, and we can focus on the important stuff today. So with that, let's think about this question that is forming the title and the session that we've got here today. So I thought about this for a long time. There's plenty of sessions out there on what is Fabric, why Fabric, introducing Fabric, all things Fabric. But I really wanted to focus on the impact that this technology is going to have for us as a business, as professionals, as data engineers, and everything in between, above, etc. So, I went away, I thought about this for a while, and you may or may not have read the abstract that I put together for this session. Now, I promise you, I wasn't drunk when I wrote it, but there's obviously a lot of key things in here that I kind of wanted to call out for you. I said, obviously, quite sarcastically, Data-Ware-Lake-Delta-Beach-House-Lakes, or some combination of that. I said everything's got a bit meshy, and playing on all the words of fabric and yarn and everything in between. I think this is quite the frank reality of where we are. We need to understand these things. We need to know what next and why, etc. So, this is all sort of the thinking and the context that hopefully I can then use for you today to drive this agenda, to drive the things that I think it's important for us to know about. You'll see in here as well that I've said 2 years now seems to have become the benchmark for tools to live and die by, which is, as I'll evidence very shortly, the reality. And it's that reality that I want us to focus on, ignoring the hype. And I've said here as well, with the pragmatic view of an experienced architect. Pragmatic, absolutely. Sarcastic, probably. Cynical, sure. All of these things. Grumpy, yes. but hopefully passionate is what I will at least project through my webcam to you this evening, this morning, etc. And yes, the what, the why, the how. So with that context, then, let's think again about that question. And what, why, absolutely. But if we just change that question and say, well, can Microsoft Fabric have an impact on your business? Answers: no. End of session. Good night. Thanks for listening. Of course it can. Of course it can. And maybe you'll get my silly sense of humor here as we go through. But it's important, I think, for us to understand that how, what's actually going to be the meat of what we need to talk about. But in leading up to that, I was also thinking about the what and the why. When I prepare for sessions and talks and training and things, I put together these titles and abstracts. And while I was refining my content here, I also thought, well, what does Microsoft Fabric mean for your business? Sure, I thought, well, why implement Microsoft Fabric as part of your technology landscape? All things that we need to know. And then amidst that what and why, I also then found myself asking the question, will Microsoft Fabric have an impact on your business? And that was kind of one that I stuck on for a little bit. I almost made that the title of my talk, but I thought, no, that's far too cynical. But then I thought a bit more and I thought, well, that impact that it's going to have, I then thought, well, let's extend it a little bit further. And I thought, well, will Microsoft Fabric have a positive or negative impact on your business? And again, that was one that I thought about for a long time. And I think with that pragmatism, ignoring the hype, I think there's a very real possibility that Fabric could have a negative impact. Now, as a data professional, as somebody passionate about the technology, I don't want that to happen. So hopefully we can be cynical. As a Microsoft MVP, I think it's my duty to hold Microsoft accountable for some of the products and tech that they put out there. I feel that's part of my job. So let's make sure that Fabric doesn't have that negative impact. Let's try and make that impact positive. But, with that accountability and a bit of cynicism thrown in as well. So with that, and context and perspective is absolutely critical here. Let's draw a timeline, an arrow, a timeline. Now, my timeline, as I've kind of said to you, is quite a long one. If you want to extend my timeline backwards, you can date me by the use of SQL Server 2000. I'm sure there's people on the call that could go further back than that, but DTS packages in SQL Server 2000 was where I kind of started my career, if you like, in data. And obviously every Microsoft data technology since then moving forward. I also worked with SQL Data Warehouse. I worked with Azure Data Lake Analytics. The timeline continues. Microsoft gave us Azure Data Explorer. They gave us Azure Synapse Analytics, of course. And then most recently, for the sake of this timeline anyway, they gave us Microsoft Fabric. And I said to you that in the abstract, I said 2 years becomes kind of a milestone. And if you Google some of the release dates of some of these products, sure enough, that's what you will see. You will see a 2-year gap between these. Now, of course, SQL Data Warehouse, it's evolved. It's got morphed into Synapse and it kind of continues in different forms. Data Lake Analytics sadly didn't make it. It got canned, frankly. Data Explorer, good tool. Did it quite take off in the way the stealth bomber icon would lead you to believe? Maybe not. But now we see just about 2 years, halfway through 2023, we get Microsoft Fabric. So this is kind of the thing that I want us to focus on. It's that perspective, it's that context, it's that timeline, and it's that evolution. Because it's obviously through that that we can really understand that impact that Microsoft Fabric is going to have, hopefully. Let's see. So let's move on and let's obviously ask that very important question then. What is Microsoft Fabric? Lots of people have obviously answered this, but I want to give you kind of my answer to obviously ground us and give us some good background for the important stuff. So I'm going to answer it in a few different ways. I want us to firstly focus on the vision and that stack evolution, as I've kind of already said in that timeline. And with that, if we ask Microsoft, well, what is Fabric? They will give us an answer on their website a little bit like this. And there's some good things in here. Normally, I will mock the marketing people for describing technology they don't understand. That's marketing, they're good at what they're good at. But here we do actually have quite a good description. This end-to-end analytics solution, all of these service capabilities. Yeah, I would agree. This is what we want. They're also telling us a little bit about why we might want Fabric in here as well. We no longer need to stitch together individual analytics services from multiple vendors. Bit of a dig at the competition there, Microsoft, but hey, competition's healthy. So sure, Fabric is this end-to-end analytics solution, with full service capabilities. Okay, but again, context, we need to understand that evolution. The vision, of course, here as well is about creating that unified platform, that unified experience where as data professionals we can come in and we can have everything we need in one place. Low friction, I'm sure, might be a word that you'll have heard from the build announcements and the sessions there. This is true. This is what we want. We want low friction so we can deliver that all-important data insight for our customers, for our business. So if we take Fabric, and I'll give you another slightly more fleshed out timeline, slightly more fleshed out evolution and a tech stack. So at the bottom there, we see that unified environment that is Microsoft Fabric with all of those capabilities built into it. If we go back one generation, shall we say, Microsoft gave us a very similar vision when it came to Synapse Analytics. It was that same unified platform, going after all of that good stuff. Same idea. The vision is very much the same here. We're trying to unify, to reduce friction, to make it easier for us to deliver that insight. Once more, we've got our core resources. We've got Databricks, we've got Data Factory, Data Lake. I call them the core three. I talk to my customers, I say, hey, you need some bricks, you need some factory, you need some lakes, and you're good to go. Those are your core services, and of course, Power BI to visualize it as well. We could go back one further if you like. We could obviously go back lots and lots of times, but maybe we'll call the visual there in the top left. Let's call that the Old Republic if you're a Star Wars fan. But the assumption here as well is that we're dealing with distributed compute. We're dealing with big data. Let's give it some air quotes because big data is relative to what it is that we actually need to do and the time that we have to do it. So I think all of this perspective, this evolution, this understanding of that vision, this is all very important in us now knowing, well, how's Fabric going to have that impact? If we understand this evolution of where we've come from, we understand now what's going to be baked into these tools. This is going to help us. So let's continue. Let's continue with, well, what is Microsoft Fabric? And let's now sort of break it apart. Let's think about those experiences. And the perceptive of you out there might have noticed that I snuck in the red data activator icon in there because it wasn't in the original image that I borrowed. But hey, let's think about Fabric then in terms of the experiences and the technical capabilities. What Microsoft lists as experiences when we look at the product. Now, to understand those experiences versus the technical capabilities that it gives us, I'm going to try and give you some one-liners here as a crib sheet. Not one-liners like a comedian would give you, but one-liners as engineers and technical people that need to understand what this stuff does. Data integration, we'll start maybe with the easiest one, maybe my favorite one if you like, but workload management and orchestration with dependency chain handling and scheduling. Easy, sure. We need that, we want that, we've got that. Our data engineering experience there to offer a low code and full code development experience using Python, Scala, R, Spark SQL, either in notebooks or either in data flows, no code, full code. I've heard people say citizen developers, pro developers. When I say a pro developer, I think pro and con. I don't think pro is professional. So a good developer, a con developer, I don't know. Anyway, that's what we get within that data engineering experience. We have a data warehouse still. I think it's okay to still call it a data warehouse. Schema-driven relational entities coded in T-SQL, also covering the full set of DML, data manipulation language, and data definition language functionality. So good, we'll get all of that. That's what we want from Fabric. We look after our data scientists. We can do predictions, we can do experiments, we can expose the insights in that data to drive those outcomes for our business. Great, we've got that too. We've got the ability to explore that time series data using telemetry and whatever data might be fired at us, writing those queries in the Custo query language, all baked in here. You might think, yes, this is a familiar story to where we were with Synapse Analytics, and at this point, that's a fair assumption. We are just evolving, we are just building on that. But then when it comes to the dashboards, the metrics, and all of the good stuff that we're used to when it comes to working with Power BI, coded in DAX or Power Query and M, if you prefer, that's where perhaps there's a differentiator, because now Power BI is no longer crowbarred in like it was in Synapse with that workspace abstraction. Power BI now is very much embedded as part of the Fabric workspaces. So this unified platform really is starting to take shape. There's no friction there between these experiences. Data Activator is a great one. Obviously, we've not seen too much of it yet, but actions that are then triggered by the definitions of things that we've done in our modeled data sets. Quite looking forward to using that one. Definitely a lot of business value and things that we can inject there once we've got Data Activator set up. And then, of course, lastly, our OneLake, our distributed data storage for analytics, structured using Delta Lake tables. Delta Lake tables, of course, being Parquet underneath, but then to support that ACID resilience, JSON transaction logs, and other good stuff in there. That means that we now have ACID resilience over our data lake. Now, in all cases of these experiences and these technical capabilities, we've been there before. And to continue the one-liners, if you like, I give you some evolution, some products that maybe came before them. Think Data Factory, think Databricks, think SQL pools, think machine learning. All of these things, it's just Microsoft extending that vision to bring this platform together, to give us that unified experience, to help us to reduce that friction. So here's my kind of one-liners of those technical capabilities. Sure, there's more. This is not everything, but this is kind of the headlines, if you like, when you're looking at those experiences. Let's change gears slightly and answer that question one more time. And I'm going to give you some more air quotes here. As a traditional development workflow. Now, when I say traditional, let's think about ETL, extract, transform, and load. That's traditional enough, right? Are we still going to do the same thing in Fabric? I think yes. But maybe it'll just get a little easier for us. We ingest some data and we land it in our lake. Absolutely. We do some transformation on that data dynamically, using lots of different libraries and things, maybe using Python. Sure, we do that. We use that data engineering experience to do that. Maybe we create some dimensional models to facilitate that data serving and exploration. Again, sure, traditional, but traditional applied within the latest tools. Scoring of that data, predicting trends. Yeah, absolutely. We're still doing that. The real-time telemetry, exploring it with Custo and doing things there. Yeah, Custo is definitely a great query language to explore. You can do things with a few lines of Custo that would take hundreds of lines of SQL, as an example. So yeah, great. I want to do that. We create some dashboards, of course, with our Power BI tools, reports, and all those things that mean that the business can visualize, they can interact with that data. And then, of course, with Data Activator, we might want to then spawn actions from those things. So, we go from those experiences, those capabilities, applying that to what, as data engineers, we would normally do, let's say. And all of this is in pursuit of that same goal, to gain insight for our business. And using these experiences, these tools, these capabilities in this unified Fabric environment to do it. Good. So that's enough of what is Fabric. I think we've got the message, or at least, we should have by now. So let's turn our attention back to that hard question then, that important question that I want to try and answer for you. Now, my answer is going to be a 6-part answer, I decided. 6 seemed like a good number at the time, but there's more and things I'm sure we could add here. So to answer that, my 6-part answer here, how can Fabric have an impact on your business? The first part to my answer is going to be focused on simplifying the compute, consumption, and the run costs. Everything is up for debate here, but if we think about that and think about, well, what impact is this going to have? I give you the dreaded Azure price calculator, the bane of my life. I've been in that price calculator so many times. The customer says to me, how much is my data factory going to cost? And we go in there, we start looking at the execution times of activities. Was it an internal or an external activity? How long did the pipeline run for? How much data was it moving? All these different levers that we have to pull and push in that price calculator to try and figure out what something is going to cost us. Massive headache. Hated it. Great tool, but hated it. What we're going to get now is a simplified view. We're going to be dealing with compute and storage, and that's it. This is all we're going to have to deal with when it comes to that consumption. Licensing, let's kind of deal with that as a slightly different problem. But compute and storage is what we're going to have to deal with. Compute now that is going to be defined using capacities. Capacities that people in the Power Platform land have, of course, been dealing with for a while now. So it's great to see that now Fabric and all of its compute that it needs is evolving into this set of SKUs aligned to capacities, capacity units, if you like, CUs. Brilliant. I love that. I want some compute. I want some storage. That's it. I'm not going to have to go into the data integration experience and work out what the pipeline is doing anymore. We can just pay for some compute and we're good to go. Now, on the storage side, we don't know yet. Obviously, still to be announced. We assume storing in gigabytes and terabytes, but hey, who knows what geo-redundancy and all sort of the other good stuff that might go into that one lake sort of distributed set of data lake storage accounts that I imagine is underneath. So we don't really know what's going to happen there yet, but already we've simplified the problem. We don't have to work out DBUs and infrastructure and virtual machines and all of that sort of stuff. It's taken care of. We're abstracted away from it. So this is good. The impact here is it's saving me time, and that's a good impact. The other good thing about this simplified compute consumption is what Microsoft called bursting and smoothing. Now, I'm making a few assumptions here based on some of the links that you've got there at the below in the references. But what Power BI people have been doing with these capacities when it comes to bursting and smoothing and charging and performance is, if we think this is a very sort of freehand drawn set of compute utilization here. I don't know what the workload is that's running, but we have some very clear peaks and troughs in the way that that compute is running. Now, let's assume we're only paying Microsoft for an F64 SKU. This could be a problem, right? But no, this is not a problem. They're not going to cap that burst of activity where it peaks above that F64. What Microsoft will do is they will take obviously that amount over what we're paying for, and then they will smooth it out during those troughs. So it means that at a given point, the performance you get is obviously going to exceed an F64, but then they'll only charge us for obviously what we're using and smooth out that over time. Now, I say I'm guessing slightly here based on what we know about capacities in the Power BI premium world. But, if the same is definitely coming for Fabric, then that's brilliant. This is going to make life much easier. We can deal with things in a much more pragmatic way. This is all good. But just be careful. Not all compute here is equal. There'll be, I'm sure, lots of different ways that we quantify it in terms of the work that's actually going on underneath. We are still going to have to deal with things like concurrency limitations and queuing when it comes to Spark. How those Spark applications execute, it's not really going to burst in the same way as our other workloads. So things to think about. This is not a finished story here, but it's good. I think this is a positive impact regardless of the unknowns. Okay, let's move on. Number 2, accelerating time to insight. This sounds like a good thing that we need. If we take all of those experiences, all of those capabilities, but let's drill just into for a moment that time to insight problem. I don't think this problem has changed. I think for a long time, we've had our data sources, we've had that data insight. Now, as we've gone through in life as engineers, we've done lots of things to get from the left to the right. We've landed our data and put it in raw, cleaned, enriched, modeled, scored, served, reported on, etc., etc. I think we've been doing this for a long time. Now, as the technology has evolved, we've created code accelerators and frameworks. We've done things to integrate and embed. We've used AutoML and things to try and get to the answers that we want quickly. We've used serverless things, we've abstracted things, we've come up with new methodologies for working to try and get there and mean that our platform works better. Sure, this is all good. Nothing wrong with this because we're trying to gain insight. But what we often end up with is some very monolithic, some very complex platforms that mean that that time to insight, if we were to measure it, starts to suffer. Not only that, but there's lots of other pain points that would happen as well. Pain points around integration and ownership, quality and governance, bottlenecks in central teams, limited data sharing, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Again, not new pain points, not new problems. That time to insight in all cases starts to suffer. This is a very generic picture, of course. Let's make the picture a little more real. Here's an architecture that we may have to implement. Fabric's still in preview. Synapse can't do everything that we need here. if my customer asks me today, they're an enterprise customer, they need this in production, this could still maybe be the thing that I have to go and build for them. This is an architecture that I talk about in a SQL Bits video and a session that I delivered back in March. The timeline is still here. This was my answer to an end-to-end analytics platform in March. We saw in the earlier slides, Fabric is now an end-to-end analytics solution. But, this is hard. This is complicated. This is going to take a lot of effort to build this. Here you see I've got my bricks, my lake, my factory. I've got the core 3. I've got some SQL serving. I've got an analysis services semantic layer. I've got some log analytics for reporting. I've got some VNet integration. I've even got an IoT hub and stream analytics in there as well. I've got an express route. I've got Purview. All of this stuff takes a lot of time to build, to deploy, to manage. Sure, but this could be the answer, but the time to insight suffers. So how are we going to accelerate it? Well, if we think about the monolith, if we think about that name the icons architecture that I give you below, how is Fabric going to help us here? It'll help us by giving us a pattern that looks like this. So instead of all that complexity, we now get a very simple pattern in Fabric. This is Microsoft's Lakehouse pattern. And when I first saw this, I looked at it and I thought, okay, yeah, this looks easy. This looks better. This looks nicer, simpler. Absolutely. And I thought, so what? So what? Is this really going to help me? But then I looked a little closer. And looking a little closer, what we see from that data source to ingestion, it's not a metadata-driven framework. It's a shortcut. What's a shortcut? Microsoft have been very subtle here. I don't know if it's deliberately or not. But now when it comes to ingesting that data from something else, we have a shortcut that we can create to another data lake, to an Amazon S3 bucket if you want. And we get that effect of that data being available to us in one lake directly. Great. Sounds good. So it's one pattern amongst many, but there's another subtlety in here as well. When we go from that storage vertical to that exposed vertical, we've got a lake house and we've got an arrow going from the lake house to Power BI. So, okay. Microsoft, what they've done is now within Fabric, they have this notion of direct lake. Direct lake meaning that Power BI can serve directly on that lake house, as the arrow suggests. The arrow is correct. There's some very clever stuff happening underneath there. Microsoft have done some things with the Vertipack engine, which means it can now read Parquet directly and quickly. We don't have to have that semantic layer, that imported model, or even a composite model. We don't have to start making choices about how much data we load into analysis services. Power BI can serve on the lakehouse directly. So this is great. Let's assume we just create a shortcut, we do some modeling, and we can serve it. That time to insight, that friction, much better. That's not the end of it. This is just one pattern, or what you might have heard called a happy path. I'll call it a pattern because I'm not happy. A pattern for a lake house. We get a pattern for a data warehouse. Similar set of objects in here. They're now called shortcuts and mounts. Okay, fine. We get a pattern for our data scientists. We get a pattern for our real-time analytics. And there's another little subtlety in here as well. If I just grab my laser pointer, this mirroring that we've got there in that real-time pattern. Because of course, and what we know is that within Fabric, everything sits within that same storage. It sits within one lake. So it's all there. It doesn't matter what compute we bring to the party here. These four patterns define separately, but It's not like, they're exclusive. We could very much and very easily have a blended or a hybrid pattern, if you like, because the storage is common. Every compute that we bring to that storage can access it and deal with it. We can do things with our lake house and serve it through a warehouse, do some real-time analytics as well if we want, serve that and do some modeling and training as well. So accelerating that time to insight, hopefully you'll agree through what I've described here and the dark times, if you like, before, and now obviously these new patterns that Microsoft are giving us and how they're going to help. Let's move on. The third argument I will put before you, good people: unifying the tooling, avoiding complex infrastructure. Well, what do we mean by that? Let's start by thinking about complex infrastructure. Maybe we need some air quotes again. What do we mean by complex? Well, let me give you 3 data factories and 3 storage accounts. Let's assume I want to connect to them. I want my data factory to talk to it. I will need an Azure integration runtime. I'll need a link service connection, and my data factory can access my storage over a public endpoint, a public connection. But that works. We could do that. Not very good, not very secure, but we could. We could enable the firewall on the storage, and we could then hope that the service we're connecting to, data factory, is fine. We hope that it's a trusted service, and when it uses its managed identity, it will knock at the firewall and it will be allowed in because it's using that type of authentication to gain access. So sure, we could do that, but still maybe not in line with the requirements of your organization if they want everything running on a private network connection. If they do, we might need to deploy a self-hosted integration runtime on a dedicated virtual machine, maybe using infrastructure. If we do that, we might need to deploy a virtual network. We might need a subnet. We'll have to put a private endpoint on that subnet from that virtual network. That integration runtime client from Data Factory will need to be installed on there. We'll need a private endpoint from our storage. We'll need a DNS zone in order to resolve the IP address that that private endpoint has now got. And then we can use private link as the prefix to the link service for our data factory to access the storage. We might have to do this. There is a third way, of course. What Microsoft now gives us is what they call a managed virtual network. We can create a managed private link, and we can go through the motions to get to that private link. Abstraction, as you can perhaps appreciate, from the middle one, but not supported by everything. It's there as a managed VNet within our data factory integration runtime, and we could do that for storage. But of course, in our architecture, typically we'll have a lot more than storage. So we'll almost certainly, if we do this today, for an enterprise customer perhaps, end up using that middle pattern. It's not the end of the story. I said bricks, factory, lake. Let's bring our bricks into the picture and consider some other things here. Maybe we need an express route to access our on-premises network. I want Databricks to do some transformation. Databricks, of course, underneath is going to have a Spark cluster that will have a control node and worker nodes. It will need to go on a subnet that's maybe connected to that VNet that can then access that storage. Now, this becomes painful because the next question I'll get asked is, how many IP addresses do you need for your virtual network that you've got in the middle there? So, well, I don't know. I'm a data engineer. I'm going to write some notebooks in Databricks and execute them. Spark's going to do the work for me. I might auto-scale that cluster to 50 nodes or something like that. Depends on the work. I'm just dealing with the data as a data engineer. But suddenly I'm being asked the question about IP addresses. Every node within that Spark cluster is going to use 2 IP addresses on that subnet. If you deploy Databricks in its default form, it's going to create a VNet with 65,000 IP addresses. I had a conversation with a networking guy at a customer. I said, can I have 65,000 IP addresses? He said, no chance. He says, you can have 5. I said, well, thanks. 5 IP addresses. He says, don't spend them all at once. I said, yep. So that'll get me a control node and a worker node, and then we're probably done. But this complex infrastructure, as you can see, it's creeping in here. We're not done. If we want to access the data lake file system, we're going to need another endpoint. We're hitting another domain name here. We're going to need another private DNS service. And we're going to need another link service connection. Maybe at the moment, this VNet, maybe there's an express route circuit there, but maybe it's actually peered and it's part of a wider hub and spoke corporate network. Maybe we've got all the TIE fighters coming in, led by Darth Vader at the center. All those TIE fighters all going pew, pew, pew at my data engineering problems that I'm trying to deal with. And then somebody's bombarding me with all these VNets. This is painful. I don't want to have to do this. But if my customer mandates everything on a private connection, we have to deal with IP address ranges and peering and make sure that things don't overlap and they talk to each other. There's ways around it, but it's not simple. Hopefully, in the land of Fabric, it's going to be. I don't know for sure yet, but it's on my wish list. But if we think about that good old-fashioned set of boxes of how we've become to think about things, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, I think, where does Fabric sit on here? Now, I've heard in certain announcements and build sessions, they will call one lake, the software as a service data lake and things like that. But it feels like, obviously, if we can get away from all of that complex infrastructure in this unified tool, maybe if I put a dotted line in there, that's roughly about where I want Fabric to sit. So I don't have to deal with all of that stuff. I can focus as an engineer on the insights that I want to deliver. Let's play on words. Let's call it Fabric as a service. This new thing that sits between platform and software. Maybe let's call it Mesh as a service. Maybe a step too far. But hey, you get my silly humor. Hopefully, though, you agree with my argument here, that by that unified tooling, if that integration is good, we are going to avoid that complex infrastructure. I'm not going to have to answer the question again when I deploy Databricks or Spark of how many IP addresses do you need. I don't want to have to answer that problem. Sure, I get why it's a problem, but as an engineer trying to deliver insight, take that away from me, please. Next up then, empowering our business users. I want to do this. I want to empower them. How can we do this? Well, the way I'll visualize this for you, or the story I'll tell, and hopefully it makes sense. Everything that we get within Fabric as those experiences, we know is wrapped up as workspaces. We know that at the moment we have to go to powerbi.com to get to it. Frustratingly, that's what we do. Now, for those business users to be empowered, the way I think about it is a time before Fabric. I like to represent everything as a Venn diagram. So before Fabric, BF, if you like, we had our business users that sat there, and then we had our engineers, if you like, on the other side. We had our Azure data platform. And of course, as you see in my Venn diagram, Power BI was very much that point of overlap, where the business users, the Power Platform would come to play, and the data platform people would say, yes, I've done all of the wrangling and the engineering, the transformation, the modeling. I've done all of the ETL in the data platform. Here is the served bit that I'm now going to give you in Power BI. There's a semantic layer or otherwise, whatever you want. So before Fabric, this Venn diagram was very clear. And those business users could only do what they could do because we're limited by the tools, maybe the skills, the experience they had, and the very natural separation here of the data platform and the power platform. Let's modify the Venn diagram. Let me give you after Fabric, AF, if you like. Hopefully you'll agree with me here, and I'm not just a ranting lunatic, but hopefully you'll agree with me that after Fabric, there's a much better story. We've got a much better view that actually now those business users, they're empowered because they're going to powerbi.com at the moment, and they're getting access, not just to Power BI, but to all of the tools which mean they can do all of the things. A little bit dangerous, sure, I accept some cynicism that will go with it, but they are going to be empowered. They're not going to be limited anymore by avoiding the Azure portal. And I've heard that. I'll say to somebody, oh, it's in the Azure portal. You have to go to the Azure portal. Oh, no, I'm not going there. I'll stay in my Power BI workspace, thank you. Not anymore. We're in the same environment, the same interface. It's all unified. We're all together as friends. It's okay. After Fabric, we're friends. Hopefully you agree. There's more though. The tooling hasn't stopped there. I'll just kind of crowbar sort of one slight sidebar in here as well. If we think about OneLake and empowering those business users, we now have a new client tool that we can use. We can install this on our local machines. I did this. You'll see I've got my folder in Windows, and you'll see that I've got alongside my OneDrive, my OneLake. They're there together as friends. We can right click, of course. We can sync my local instance of OneLake with everything that's up there, maybe everything that's going to be on my PC. Not quite. In the same way that our OneDrive files will decide whether they should remain in the cloud or be downloaded. There's obviously going to be some similar controls in here, we expect. Now, I obviously played with this a lot. I was going to demo this to you. Did it work? No, of course not. It's all in public preview. I've been burnt before by demonstrating preview technology. I'm not going to be burnt by it today. But just be mindful it's there. In the same way our business users are empowered with Teams and OneDrive, can we say that they're empowered now with all the Power BI and all of the experiences here and OneLake? It's all coming together. I think so. Number 5, let's pick up the pace. Driving innovation. Ooh, how's Fabric going to impact us there if we're driving innovation? Well, we of course can't ignore the other big announcement in Copilot. You definitely must have heard about Copilot and large language models and all of that good stuff. Copilot is coming, not just to answer the easy questions, what was once a hard question, but answering the easy questions of show me some aggregated thing from my data. No, that's easy. Copilot's better than that. It can do things like summarizing our meetings, drafting a response, or getting something ready. Sure, but still not quite what I'm going for here. Yes, Copilot's capable of it, but what I'm really excited by is its ability to do the technical stuff, the hard stuff, if you like, the ability to write SQL, to write DAX, the ability to build dashboards. So we're now driving innovation by the very fact that Fabric and Copilot is going to improve our productivity here. We're going to be able to have things that are context aware. We can interact with them in natural language. In the same way we'll interact with our colleagues, maybe. It will give us suggestions that we can edit and improve and use. So for me, this is definitely going to be a big impact. We know that AI is always going to have an impact somewhere. And obviously, this is just the next evolution of it in these language models and what Microsoft are going to give us in Copilot. Now, as for Copilot and Microsoft Fabric, not quite there yet. Obviously, we've seen some announcements and some cool demos and things on YouTube, but I think we could safely say that it's not quite there yet. Now, if you wanted to know about Copilot and Fabric, do feel free to tweet my good friend Benny. He's a senior program manager in the Fabric Cat team. He loves talking about Copilot and Fabric, so do feel free to reach out to him. Let's move on. Number 6, 10 minutes left. Improving governance. Now, this could be a big one, but how's Fabric going to help us here? Well, if we think about what we've got available, I've broken the animations in this one. I can't build up to it in the same passionate way that I've done with the others. Sorry. But you'll obviously get the view from my picture here that within Fabric now, if we think about that compute and that storage, we will get the Fabric admin portal. We will get this plane where we can do all of the administration and monitoring, security, and all of that good stuff together. We will get things that we've come to know and love in Purview when it comes to cataloging. We'll get new things around endorsement and lineage baked in. But the thing that hopefully promises a lot is this idea of one security. Yes, playing on one lake. One security that will mean that we apply security at that storage level, and then every type of compute that interacts with it is going to adhere to that security model that's been applied. Instead of, if you think about the Azure control plane, if you think about Synapse, even Databricks, there's a disconnect there in all of them when it comes to what we're doing with security. Sure, they'll all probably use storage and different things underneath. Now we apply those roles, those permissions at the storage level in one place, and every compute that we bring to it will respect that. Great, going to make things so much easier. My other argument here around governance is that, like with our security, if we have sensitivity, a highly confidential attribute that's in our storage layer, again, we apply it at that storage layer. We apply it in one lake, and every compute that we bring to that storage will understand that. It will respect that. But what's more, there's a very cool demo on YouTube that if you apply that highly confidential label and somebody then takes that data into Excel, that sensitivity will follow that data to Excel as well. So that Office integration, if that data was to leave the confines of our one lake, is also going to be applied. Great, looking forward to it. And then lastly, as you'll probably gather, the Fabric APIs. Microsoft aren't just going to look after Purview, they are going to support their competitors in here as well. Calibra, Relation, Informatica, they're all sort of brought in here to support and join the fun. Can't wait. And then we couldn't talk about governance without addressing domains. Domains, what are they then? Well, let's just have a look what the marketing people say once more. This was a good one. Federated models, federated governance. As Microsoft say here, this federated architecture is called data mesh. Yes, absolutely. A vendor that has leaned into the concepts of a data mesh and embedded it into the way that the storage is going to work. Brilliant. What are Fabric domains? It's this logical grouping together of all the data in an organization that is relevant to a particular area or field. Let's call it a business function or similar. Great. This is now baked in and as part of the Fabric unified environment. What's it going to look like in reality? Well, I had a few arguments with Josh, the Microsoft PM at the MVP summit around this, because of course I am very much a fan of data mesh and I've done lots of things with it. So to see that a vendor's leaned in to using domains as part of their storage layer, I thought, okay, how's this going to work then? So we create some domains on our OneLake and we wrap them up. But to try and be explicit of what that actually looks like, because as it says here, they're logical groupings. So the way that they're going to wrap up, if we think about a hierarchy, we have OneLake, we have a workspace, we have our items within the workspace, the artifacts, if you like. Domains are going to sit there as that logical layer between the OneLake, the root, if you like, and the workspace. Domains can then span workspaces. Great, exactly what we wanted. So obviously continuing that improving of governance, domains now obviously something that as a concept in this federated, this decentralized, this data mesh architecture that of course we've longed for. Now we've got a very easy, fairly natural, native, if you like, way to actually apply it in Fabric. I'm nearly out of time, so let me summarize. Let me summarize, hopefully, and come back to that question. How or can Microsoft Fabric have an impact on your business? Yes, it can. The how, hopefully, today, I give you that 6-part argument of those different things that I think is going to have the most impact. But ultimately, the timeline here will tell. That 2-year period is going to tell. Now, I said pragmatism. Sure, I've been fairly positive, a little bit cynical. There's also going to be my wish list here of what I want in Fabric for when it becomes generally available. Source control, network connectivity, key vault integration, a new URL. I don't want to go to powerbi.com anymore. That's just confusing. One security and comprehensive monitoring. So it will have an impact. Let's keep an eye on that timeline. Let's work on it. A couple of things. What I've tried to do for you here is, because I appreciate I went through a lot of stuff, a lot of theory, maybe some of it was quite dry, some not so. What I've tried to do is I've tried to distill this for you into what I'm going to call a point of view on how Fabric can have an impact. So I've tried to condense, distill that content into a one-pager that you're very welcome to go and take a copy of from the CloudFormations website. CloudFormations/points of view. Help yourself to that. There's also one on there as well around that evolution of Fabric that I've talked about, so that timeline. So feel free to help yourself to that. Another one, CloudFormations/community content. If you'd like a copy of the slides that I've just shown you, also feel free. There's a PDF there. You can go and download them. I'm not going to take your email address and spam you. You can go and have that as well. And with that, I think 2 minutes to go. I'll say thank you very much for listening. My contact details in here, and also, of course, the company's contact details. If we can help you, we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to debate some of these things with you as well. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. Great session there. Really insightful. Obviously, loved the presentation style as usual. It came across really, really well. And we've got some great comments coming in as well from our audience. So, Pragati, would you like to start us off, please?
Yeah, sure. First of all, Paul, amazing presentation. Really love the way you designed the slides and the format. Pretty cool. So I'll start with, we have got a few questions in there. So let's start with one question there. So you talked about domains. So there is a question from Ian. If you can explain domains to me, how they relate to workspaces and what benefits they provide, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, good question. I think with a lot of this stuff, we're going to have to figure it out. I have not deployed Fabric for a customer in production. It's just too new. But I'll give you the answer of what I hope and what I believe based on the conversations I've had. Those domains are going to sit there at the OneLake level. So at a level that is higher than workspaces, but lower than that root OneLake set of storage. And hopefully we could define a domain. Let's call it people. We define a domain of people in our business. Now, within people, we might have a workspace for payroll, for sickness and absence reporting. I don't know, a workspace even for payroll, perhaps. Maybe. Obviously, those workspaces are going to have different security and different rules and things behind them. But what I would hope to be the case, if we're really leaning into data mesh concepts here, is that we can define that domain at that virtual level that sits above multiple workspaces, that can bring things together for our users, give them blended views and pull together, say, the data that's relevant for them when they're reporting. And obviously there'll be an interesting bit to understand around how that applies to the security as well. So this is kind of what I'm hoping, what I'm expecting, what I think will be the case.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. We've had a couple of questions coming in regards to the presentation. So I know that you've shared with us the link. I have put that link into the chat as well. So please, if you do want to get a presentation slides, just go over to the CloudFormation's website with the link in the chat to go and grab those. Let's jump into another question. Ian, I know there's another question from you, but we've just asked one from yourself. So let's go to Anal, and they ask, any indication or rumors on external data sharing from Fabric's ecosystem, like Delta sharing on Databricks or data share on Purview?
Not that I've seen. I don't know. So I would hope, yes. We have data sharing within Azure and Purview and things like that. How Microsoft choose to apply or not apply that to Fabric and OneLake at this point, I don't know.
Excellent, thank you. Just moving into our next question, Pragati, this one's from Kevin Young, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so Kevin is asking here, could Fabric provide the same functionality as those from Databricks services?
Oh dear, that question. I summarized that question when people asked me in the context of Synapse. I said, you take the red pill or the blue pill. The same functionality, I think that's a dangerous one. I'm going to directly say no. Will they provide the same functionality? Because you've got two very mature software vendors there. Databricks, sure, they are a lot more mature when it comes to delivery of Spark, the Photon engine, and all of that good stuff that they've baked into Databricks. That's, I think, is always perhaps going to be the winner. But then you say, well, Microsoft is more mature when it comes to the platform, the integration, the identity management. And, it's very much, I think, we can sit here as professionals and think, just leave these software giants to do what they're good at. And obviously we'll deliver what we need for our customers. Yeah, the functionality, the things there, it's an interesting one to go and debate. And Databricks have done some great things open sourcing Delta Lake as well. The announcements from the Data and AI Summit a few weeks ago now, feels like a few weeks. Yeah, they're really leaning into Delta and supporting Hoodie and Iceberg as well. So yeah, it's a good one to debate. Let's watch this space. Let's find out.
Definitely, and a great time to be in the space. That I would say as well. So we do have quite a few more questions, Paul, but I'm very conscious of time. So what I would suggest, if it's okay with you, is ask people to reach out to you directly at cloudtransformations.org, or obviously on Twitter and LinkedIn, if that's okay, to really continue those conversations. We do have some feedback coming in. So Srinivas, thank you. It's a great session. Donald, thanks for a good overview. Hamid even, thank you. And Joe Kelly finally saying great session, and then thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us. Like I say, been a fantastic bit of a. I would still call it a deep dive into Fabric and how it can be kind of utilized, harnessed, and the positive points, the benefits, and the cons, as you put it as well. So excellent session. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks a lot. Bye for now.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will be back with you in the near future with another fantastic session on the Microsoft Data Platform ecosystem, whether that's Power BI or Microsoft Fabric. So you could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us at the Microsoft Fabric UK User Group.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.